Hi, I'm Liz Morris, co-founder of the Nail Hub and Attain Cosmetics, and I wanted to start a series with you to explain a little bit about what Attain is, why we created it, and some history behind the nail industry, and how we've come to find ourselves with some very serious issues within gel nail products themselves. Now, you may or may not have heard of nail allergies. This is a topic that is on the rise, and it is something that is becoming more and more prevalent across all different levels of nail product user, whether it be beginning DIY all the way up to advanced careered professionals. So let's talk about the truth behind nail allergies and why it's such a big deal. Much like most products in our world, nail products are chemicals. There's very, very important chemistry that goes into formulating and creating all of the gel nail products that we use. And there's a lot of similarities between even liquid and powder acrylic products as well as gels. With liquid and powder acrylic products that you may have seen in all different types of salon settings, we have to actually mix a powder polymer with a liquid monomer to create the actual product that's going to polymerize and harden on our nails. There's often a very unique odor that comes along with liquid and powder acrylics that probably a lot of people can recognize if they smell it. And that mix ratio between the dry powder and the liquid is very important. And that's really where a lot of that chemistry and that know-how comes into play. If we have the wrong mix ratio, we're going to have too liquidy of an acrylic. If we have it too dry, it's going to be too brittle. And also that can actually create problems with, again, some exposure on the skin, things not polymerizing completely, and creating an issue where we may create overexposure to some of the ingredients that are in the product. Gel is actually a pre-mixed product. So unlike liquid and powder where we have to mix two products together, gel is a pre-mixed polymer blend that we can actually polymerize inside of a nail lamp. Nail lamps utilize UV light to kick off the chemical reaction that hardens our product. And so with gel nails, the most important part of making sure our product is cured to sufficient levels is making sure that we have not only a good formula in its liquid state, but also the proper UV light source to fully polymerize that product. So I keep talking about polymerization. Let's dig in a little bit into what polymerization is, how it works, and what really happens when we expose gel nail products to UV light. I don't know about you, but I am a visual learner, so I wanted to show you what polymerization basically looks like with a simple demonstration. Here on my table, I have some magnetic beads that are representative of different components in our liquid gel formula. These yellow guys are going to represent monomers, our pink ones are going to represent photoinitiators, and our green ones are going to represent things like pigment or maybe other different polymer structures we might have dissolved into the gel formula. What ends up happening is that all of these things are free floating inside of a gel formula, and depending on how much monomer, you might have tons of monomer throughout all of these different components. Right now I just have 3 just to show you guys. The idea behind polymerization is we are creating polymers. We're taking all of these free floating components, we're bonding them together at a chemical level through UV light exposure, and we end up with these long strings called polymer chains. These polymer chains are then the hardened product, so we go from liquid to a solid. Now, one of the cool things that we can do in order to mitigate things like allergies, heat spikes, all of that, is instead of using individual monomers like this that all have to be bonded together, we can use oligomer chains, which are multiple monomers that are pre-built into these smaller chain structures, and eliminate a lot of the bonding sites. Every time a bond is created between one of these different components, there is heat released. And we also need a specific amount of energy to break down our photoinitiators to create that bonding chemical reaction to begin with. So if we are able to pre-build some of these structures instead of having them all free floating by themselves, we only have to do a few bonds to create our polymer chains instead of having to create all of these individual bonds in between, okay? So in this case, our photoinitiators would break down. They break down and create something called a free radical. Think of this as a very lonely guy looking for some friends. So he will go out and he will still want to bond with a monomer. he'll bond with a different part of the formula, and pretty soon we start to create these polymer chains. But every time you hear this magnet click and you see it connect, that is one more bond that has to be created to get it to a sufficiently cured level. And it also is one more place that heat is created, which means higher burning sensation when you're curing it in your UV lamp. Attain utilizes oligomer chains. We utilize larger molecular structures that are that much more difficult to be absorbed into your body. This gives you a lot of leeway when it comes to human error, where maybe you did slightly undercure your product. Well, even if you have some free-floating oligomers in there, these are not small enough to be absorbed into the human body. Whereas if we have free-floating monomers left over in our formula, even after it's been cured, we end up with the situation where these free-floating monomers, if they haven't fully polymerized, can actually leach out of our product even while we wear it on our nails. HEMA, for example, is water soluble, which means that every time we bathe, we wash our hands, or our hands come into any kind of contact with water, the HEMA can actually leach out of even what looks like hardened products, get up onto our hands or our skin, and absorb into our body, therefore creating the potential for the development of an allergy. So this is what we don't want. We don't want to see any leftover monomers that haven't bonded with our polymer chains. And so we eliminate a lot of that risk by pre-building them into these oligomer structures. So even if one of these guys doesn't get fully cured, maybe you didn't cure it long enough, maybe your hand placement wasn't 110% correct, maybe something went wrong with the thickness of the layer, whatever it might be, there's a lot of room for human error when it comes to gel application. And we want to make sure that even if there is human error, we don't have crazy, drastic risks or consequences. So as you can see, there's a lot happening within our product that we can't see with our naked eye. And also, one of the most interesting things about the polymerization process is that gels can appear hardened when they are only about 50% cooked. So this is something that is really interesting because a lot of people think, well, it seems hard to the touch, it's not goopy or bubbly or peeling, but at the end of the day, they may be walking around with gel that is only 50% or less polymerized. And that is where we can get some of this issue with monomers constantly coming into contact with our bodies, which can then create an overexposure reaction. Overexposure is really what we're talking about when we're talking about wearing undercured product. Not only are we touching and utilizing that product in its liquid state, so that's where our formula, even in and of itself, becomes very important, but even after the product has been cured in a UV nail lamp, we need to consider whether or not there's still uncured product, uncured ingredients and monomers in that hardened product that may actually be able to leach out of that product, get onto our skin, absorb into our bodies, and create the overexposure reaction. Overexposure basically explains you exposing your body and therefore your immune system to something repeatedly to the point that your immune system starts to create a response. Our human bodies like things in moderation. Anytime we go to extremes where we're consuming too much sugar, too much fat, even too much protein, things that sound good, if we overexpose ourselves to them, we can create problems in our bodies. The same thing goes for chemical exposure. So in small quantities, in controlled settings, we can create a very safe scenario where we can enjoy all the fun stuff about nail care without a lot of the risk or issues. But once we start to create an overexposure scenario, a lot of people's bodies start to react with things like contact dermatitis and developing other forms and manifestations of allergies. So the truth behind nail allergies is that it really comes down to two key components. It's not just about curing, it's truly about also making sure that the liquid formula is safe to use and handle even before it goes into the lamp to be polymerized. It's one of those things where people say, be careful, keep it off the skin, be careful about how you apply things. But at the end of the day, when we're working with a specific medium, it is going to be inevitable that we're going to come into contact with it, whether it be wiping off inhibition layers or accidentally getting a little bit of color on our cuticle. We want to make sure that things are safe to handle and that we're mitigating a lot of that risk up front with the ingredients that we choose to put into the gel formulas to begin with. Now, the second part of this issue comes down to curing. Again, remember I said that gel can appear hardened even at its only 50% polymerization rate. So if we are walking around with undercured product, that means we are more likely to have free-floating monomers and other ingredients that can leach out of that product even while we're wearing it, and also during removal and reapplication. We create a scenario where we're constantly exposing ourselves to those chemicals repeatedly, and pretty soon for some people, the body decides, I've had enough of this, the immune system starts to create a reaction to it, and that is where we start to get a lot of these issues that can start to manifest. So by addressing this from two different angles, we can mitigate a ton of risks and a ton of these issues and get back to enjoying nail care safely and effectively, having the results that we're looking for, but also most importantly, having fun with something that brings us joy and adds beauty to our lives. So I hope this video has helped you understand a little bit more about the truth behind nail allergies, helps give you a little bit of confidence that it isn't some mysterious thing that we can't address or we can't put our finger on. It really is able to be boiled down to some fundamental sources. And if we are conscious consumers and we think about what we're purchasing, as well as being conscious manufacturers and think about what we're making, we can eliminate a lot of these issues and get back to having fun. In my next video, I'm going to be talking about how we got to this place in the nail industry where we have some irresponsible manufacturing and just this issue of allergies continuing to rise. I'll go over the history of gel nail products for you and talk about how we got from point A to point B.